Hello and welcome to Inside Drug Discovery. This video is a reaction to a recent announcement by the US FDA. So 2 days ago, on April 28th, 2026, the FDA put out a press release about developing real-time clinical trials. And so I'm going to react to that content, so let's go ahead and jump into the FDA video. All right, here we are in the video. This is their title slide, very nice title. And now I'm going to move myself up. And now let's go about 450 something into the video, and that's when really things begin kicking off.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being here for today's very exciting announcement. I want to thank our speakers for their leadership today and the press in advance for covering this important work. It is now my pleasure to introduce FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary.
Great. Thank you, Emily. What an exciting day this is. For the last 50 years, the medical profession has sadly grown to accept a 10 to 12 year time frame for new drugs to come to market.
Oh, sadly come to accept.
And as a result, patients are getting drugs in a delayed fashion when they could be getting them sooner. Today is a milestone day for us to challenge that deeply held assumption that it must take 10 to 12 years.
Okay, I'm not going to push back always this strongly, but if you go back about 50 years, I'm going to go back a little further, about 60 years. And about 60 years ago, there was, in the FDA, or the Congress passed the Kefauver-Harris amendments to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And why did they do that? That's really what kicked off a lot of the preclinical toxicology testing and a lot of the safety testing that goes into the drug development process today. Well, the reason they did that was because of the thalidomide disaster. Terrible disaster that the United States was mostly protected from. But thousands of children were born with deformities at birth. So there's a reason why we've done this, and it was in the name of safety. So just keep that in mind as we go through this talk. And that's the thing that I think 50 years ago is probably what the commissioner is referring to. It was in response to the thalidomide disaster, a terrible safety disaster.
We have to ask some big questions. Can we do better? Can we use new technology?
Listen, I got no problem. Let's re-examine this. Can we do better? That's a fair question. But it's not, sadly, it was to protect the public health, which is the primary mission of the FDA.
Can we make our communications with sponsors more efficient? Very few people know that 45% of the drug development time is dead time. That is 45% of the time between the initiation of the phase 1 clinical trial and the FDA application at the end. There is no ongoing clinical trial. Investigators and staff are doing paperwork and other tasks.
I didn't know it was that much. I am a little surprised that it's 45%. That does strike me as inefficient, and that involves communication. I wouldn't call all this paperwork. I think that kind of demeans, maybe you call it regulatory oversight, data analysis. It's not, some of it's paperwork, but not all.
Many of which are tedious. In one case, the FDA received an application that was 66 million pages. It's a joke. I mean, it's not a joke that it was 66 million pages. It's a joke that there was an application that was 66 million pages. We can do better.
Okay, that is a lot. I don't handle these drug dossiers. I don't know how big they get. I know that they're massive. 66 million pages seems huge, but you can't define an application by a page count. And it'd be interesting to know, was that application, was it granted? Maybe it failed. Maybe they were trying to cover up. So, okay, let's go.
We can introduce a radical modern concept called the page limit. Companies are spending years on the tedious tasks. They don't like doing it, and we don't need them to do it sometimes. After a trial is complete, sponsors collect data, manually enter it into multiple systems, analyze it, and package it at the end of the phase 1 trial, again at the end of the phase 2 trial, and again at the end of the phase 3 trial. It's tedious.
It is tedious, but it needs to be done, and it's going to have to be done in some form. Maybe it could be done better. Absolutely. I have no problem with examining this process, but there's a reason why these processes have come into place. And maybe some of those reasons are no longer valid because of technological advancements. But I don't think you can dismiss where this process came from. And candidly, in many cases, how well it has served protecting the public health.
What's more is the dead time has been expanding. It was 25% of the drug timeline. Then it turned to 35%, and now we're at 45%. So we are literally seeing an increase in the amount of time spent on paperwork, even as the amount of time spent in the clinical trials is decreasing. That's not a good trend, especially given the fierce global competition that we have as a country. We have to retain our position as the world leader in biotech and cures.
Okay, I don't like where this has gone. It's not going to stay here very long, but this seems to drive a different motivation than simply protect the public health.
Today, the FDA is announcing a bold new approach that could fundamentally transform the clinical trial landscape. In partnership with a major drug developer, a tech company, MD Anderson, and the University of Pennsylvania, we are announcing the first ever real-time clinical trial. This is not a theoretical, this is not a plan, this is not a statement of an intent, this is not a framework or a panel discussion about doing it. Today, up and running, is a real-time clinical trial live today. What exactly is a real-time clinical trial? Well, it's when FDA reviewers can see safety signals and clinical endpoints in the cloud in real time as a clinical trial is happening. It's revolutionary. So when a patient in a clinical trial develops a fever or is hospitalized or a tumor shrinks and a radiologist reads the new tumor size, the FDA regulators can see in the cloud in real time exactly what's happening with the agreed upon endpoints and safety signals. In addition to the promise of delivering more medications faster, today's action is an important step towards a broader goal of seeing more continuous trials.
Okay, I want to the promise of, you can take that two ways, but there is a hope for building efficiency, but there's no promise at this point. It's an idea. It's a hypothesis. But hey, this sounds interesting. Again, trying new things. That's great. And I love to see the government, happens to be my government, working on new ideas. That's good.
We have to do this in an iterative, stepwise fashion, but this is a milestone day. It's also an important step in pandemic preparedness. Imagine a circulating pathogen with a 50% mortality rate.
All right. Based on, I think many people kind of have a bad taste in their mouths because of a recent pandemic experience. And so to bring this in, again, seems like a divergence from the main mission of protecting public health. Much like we talk about it, America needs to be first in drug discovery or drug development for clinical trials. America needs to be first for pandemics. It just seems out of place.
Mortality rate that is so high, it shakes the country. Wouldn't you want to see a real-time clinical trial to get that information in real time? Or imagine you're a child who's deaf or
Pandemics aren't normally part of a clinical trial. Now, maybe if there's a treatment for the infection, but just because you're sick doesn't mean you're in a clinical trial, unless the plan is to have everybody under a clinical trial at some point, so everyone can be monitored by the FDA.
has a debilitating cancer with a potentially promising therapeutic on the horizon, you would want a real-time clinical trial. The reason we haven't done it so far is that the technology was not there, the will was not there, and we just didn't have the right time and space to make it happen. But thanks to many of the people behind me and the leadership of Jeremy Walsh and the power of cloud computing and the mass authority of electronic health records that can now be accessed at scale, with, of course, a patient's consent, we can now do things that were previously impossible.
Of course, patient consent, that's a big deal. Informed consent is a huge part of this.
We showed this dashboard of clinical endpoints and safety signals to some of our FDA reviewers, and they said that they have all kinds of ideas of what else can be added, other data points, and other future promise and potential for this.
I would love to see an example of this dashboard in working for this real-time clinical trial. Let's see something that, show, don't tell. It'd be great if we get that in this talk. Spoiler alert, we're not. But, I'm interested. I'm curious.
Type of technology. It's a great way to interact with the actual trial on a data-driven basis, in the words of one of the reviewers.
I'll just have to take their word for it.
This is also a critical step towards a broader goal that we have of seeing no lag time between the phases of clinical trials. Using better technology and common sense, we can deliver more cures and meaningful treatments to the American public without cutting any corners on safety, and that is all.
Common sense. The commissioner likes that phrase. I'm not a fan of it. But no compromise in safety. Now, if 50 years ago is really thinking 60 years ago to the thalidomide disaster, that was implemented for safety. Maybe it was wrong in the way it was implemented, but safety's how we got here.
Always our number one goal is safeguarding the public. We can use common sense and better technology.
Okay.
I personally have been traumatized by PowerPoint in my lifetime, so I'm not going to show a PowerPoint to you except to show you one graphic, which is the drug development and approval process. This is how a drug goes through the process. Now, every part of this process is being re-engineered to ask ourselves, what workflow can we make more efficient without cutting any corners on safety? Beginning with the pre-IND process, we are trying some new things. We are reducing animal testing, no longer.
Okay, let me see where I can go. Maybe I can go to the bottom here. That's probably as out of the way. I'd rather see the dashboard, but I guess we'll take this.
You need 2 species of animal testing routinely. This is a big endeavor led by the folks at Cedar and Tracy Beth Hogue. Thank you for that work, Tracy.
Let's go back.
We are trying some new things. We are reducing animal testing. No longer do you need 2 species of animal testing routinely. This is a big endeavor.
No longer needing 2 species. So currently, you typically need 2 species, one rodent, one non-rodent. So the rodent is going to be a mouse or a rat, typically a rat, and the non-rodent would be a dog or a non-human primate. So which of those are you going to get rid of? Let's say it's dogs. Well, who wants to do tests on dogs? Nobody. But that means the rat is the rat model. And let me fix my lights. That means the rat model is now your human in vivo model for safety. Humans aren't rats. Of course, humans aren't dogs either, but which species? Which is being cut out? Which is acceptable?
Led by the folks at Cedar and Tracy Beth Hogue. Thank you for that work, Tracy. We are looking to reduce and defer requirements for the IND application. Some of those requirements can be received later and only in summary form, so that we are only focusing on safety in the phase 1 trial in that requirement.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So, all these clinical trials, ultimately the goal is to have a safe and effective drug. But typically phase 1 does emphasize safety. That doesn't mean you can't get signals for efficacy in phase 1, but the real goal is to make sure that the compound is safe. Except when you're talking about life-saving or life-extending drugs, such as oncology trials for cancer. In that case, you're looking at safety and efficacy in phase 1 for various ethical reasons. So what's interesting is most of this discussion that's going to be continuing in this press release, it's all about oncology drugs. So sure, the IND can emphasize safety more than efficacy, but for the case study that's being discussed, it's all about oncology. So that would not be true for oncology drugs.
We are looking to reform the IRB process. We are announcing today the first ever FDA real-time clinical trial in partnership with some of the representatives here with me on stage. We are moving from 2-to-1 pivotal trials as a baseline default with exceptions, allowing Bayesian statistics that enable us to say, hey, you can stop a clinical trial for either overwhelming efficacy and safety or a safety signal that may require halting a trial. And the filing period is 2 months. That is done in 2 minutes with our new AI tool that shaves 2 months off the decision of every drug that comes through the FDA. It will very soon. May not sound like a lot, but if you're somebody who was waiting for zongertinib, the new treatment for HER2 mutated non-small cell lung cancer, and you're in hospice and that drug can get you out of hospice, those 60 days have a big meaning.
I would love to see, right now the FDA promises to get through their, complete the NDAs, which is the very tail end of this process, within 12 months. It'd be interesting to see if the commissioner is willing to back this up and say, okay, we're not going to deliver that in 12 months. We're going to get everybody's done in 10 months. And that's their goal, to match the fact that they have this new efficiency.
We have our new National Priority Review Program. We have now 7 decisions out, I believe, and 21 products were announced, with the 3 psychedelics announced last week. And finally, in the post-marketing period, we are using big data and harnessing the power of mass electronic health record access and cloud computing to be able to have eyes on a drug so we can see the safety and efficacy immediately after the FDA decision is made to approve.
So a lot of these initiatives that he's talking about, some are ongoing, some are future plans. All of these were outlined in, the commissioner did a 1-year review for his first year in the position as commissioner. And I did a reaction video to that. I'll leave a link up in the corner. But that was also, these are already released ideas. But the actual implementation of this real-time clinical trial is what this press release is about.
Proof. So with that, I would like to thank the many scientists from the FDA, some of whom are represented here, who have worked hard on each of these steps. This initiative today represents FDA common sense modernization in our campaign to see more cures and meaningful treatments for everyday Americans. I want to...
We do have in the background the gold standard for gold standard science, transparency, and common sense. 2 of those things maybe belong, but I'd say one doesn't.
Quickly thank those who are joining today. Dr. Emma Marr, Professor of Medicine and Pharmacology at the University of Pennsylvania and Senior Vice Dean for Clinical Research and Translational Research. Dr. Amy McKey, Senior Vice President at AstraZeneca. Kent Thoelke, CEO of Paradigm Health, a valuable partner in this endeavor. Dr. Jennifer Keaton-Litton, Chief Clinical Research Officer at MD Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Paul Burton, Chief Medical Officer and SVP at Amgen, and Dr. Melina Mundkor, FDA's own Acting Chief Medical and Scientific Officer. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And now I'll turn it over to the man who helped coordinate this entire effort, Jeremy Walsh. Jeremy, why don't you come over here, our Chief AI Officer at FDA.
Wow, so it's a pretty high-powered group of people talking at this press conference. It's really interesting. Opening remarks by Commissioner Makary. I don't agree with all of it, but I applaud the idea of let's examine why we do the things we do. That's fantastic.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for everyone for being here with us today. This one for me started around like 8 years ago when I came in one day to, I was a contractor to the FDA, and I came in to talk to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sean Kozin about just some ideas for doing some innovative things. During that meeting, we came up with, a clinical trial, which we actually ended up executing. It was an interesting one. It's around AI and pain. But one of the things that Sean did was he sort of walked me through a clinical trial. I had no idea. I was like, well, it sounds interesting. This should be easy, right? Doing a clinical trial. And so he talked to me about sort of the first clinical trial, right? It was actually for scurvy, right? It was on ships, and they basically tried to figure out what could cure scurvy. And so he walked me through that, and then talked to me about sort of the where the current sort of state of the art was, where that people were packaging data, and collecting this data and then submitting all this data to the FDA. And I said, well, that sounds like, well, I understand that's what people have done. Is what about today? Like, where are they today? And he's like, well, that's still where they're at today. What they were doing basically in the 1960s is kind of, for the most part, what they're doing today, just slightly different.
Okay, now, Jeremy Walsh, he said back in the 1960s, yeah, that they did that because there was a huge safety disaster and they didn't want that to happen again. So in the name of safety, that's how that 60s process came into being. And I don't think you can ignore that's how we got to where we are today. So if you change, you don't want to go back to that kind of safety risk. And that's, I think that is a very valid question. How can you be sure that you're not compromising on safety?
So I remember going back and writing a sort of a white paper to talk about, should the FDA implement real-time clinical trials? And I sent that up and talked to some people, and they were like, yeah, there's no one really in charge of that here. Like we think about it, there's been thoughts about it, but there's no one really sort of in charge. And so I kind of shelved that. And then time went on, and finally the opportunity presented itself to come back in here. This was something that we started as a team in, or I'd say around June of last year, May or June of last year. This was a focus area. As the commissioner mentioned, when he put up the graphic, we understand each part of the phases of the process and where sort of the weight that sort of, as the commissioner mentioned, dead time sits. And so we initially sort of were like, we're going to can we solve this part of the problem? What can we do to move the clinical trial part as fast as possible? It's interesting because the FDA doesn't really run clinical trials. Those go run outside of the FDA, right? We do our reviews and we look at a lot of information, but we don't do the actual trial. But what could the FDA do as a partner in accelerating this? So
that's a huge point. So this drug sponsor runs the trial. And just as importantly, the drug sponsor pays for the trial. They are incurring the financial risk to bring this drug into the marketplace. Is the FDA a stakeholder? Absolutely. Are clinical trial sites also stakeholders? Absolutely. But the sponsor is kind of the bag holder, the underwriter of this whole effort. So that's an important point. The FDA doesn't run these trials. They have input on their design, and they get the final say in whether a compound is going to be approved, at least in the United States, but they're not running the trial.
We began those conversations last year, started them with AstraZeneca and Amgen. I believe the first meetings when we said what we wanted to do took a couple minutes for people to be like, well, you want to not see all the data right? You only want to, you just want to see certain pieces or the signals of the data. After a series of meetings, we were able to sort of get past that. And then
that was interesting there. Do you want to see all the data, or do you just want certain signals? But they got past that discussion. I kind of want to know the answer. Does the FDA want to see everything, and what would be included in everything? Or is it really just specifically that the FDA says, this is important, that is important, and we want to see those two things, otherwise we don't care? That's interesting. I would take some time to get past that. I want to know those answers. I'd love to see that dashboard.
Things got really kind of moving, I think, in terms of the end of sort of last year, and we were able to find the right technology partner in Paradigm Health. Kent was over there, and this whole process was turned on and live this month. And what is this? What is a real-time clinical trial for the FDA? Well, a real-time clinical trial for the FDA is we're looking for signals. As the commissioner mentioned, we already get tons of data, right? We've been getting tons of data for, decades. What we're interested in is can we make a decision off of less information? Can we make a decision off of signals information, right? And so what we're starting with we work with the sponsor, we define the criteria for what a signal for what needs to be reported. They take that information, they work with a technology partner, they then provide us signals, right? And so this is the start. This is not probably where we end up, but this is the start. We have those signals coming in live, we see them, we understand what's happening on the trial. And I think this is kind of a transformative thing where
Okay, yeah, I will say this requires a lot of discussion between the FDA and the sponsor. What are the signals? You have to identify those. You have to have some basis for identification. Lots of time, that's all that preclinical data, the information that goes into that IND, which now might be stripped down. But you have to ask, and once you ask for certain signals, you're only going to get those signals. There may be other signals that are important, but because you didn't ask for them, you don't see them. So, and I'm not saying that will happen, but the conversations getting to this point have to be very deliberate and careful, because you don't want to leave anything hidden, but sometimes you don't know what's important until you see everything. So, I'm not trying to say this can't work, but just remember, the current process is in place because there was a safety problem without this process. So if you're going to get rid of the current process, you don't want to go back and repeat the same mistake. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but you got to be very careful about what you do.
The FDA is looking for, and what we're trying to do is we're reimagining, what information we need and when we need it in order to make a decision. We get information overload sometimes. We don't need everything that we receive. So this is a process for us, and this is a process that will continue. But I really want to just send my thank yous off to really everyone that was involved in this, both from our industry partners that made this possible, our technology partners, and finally, the most important people are the FDA staff that worked to make this a reality. This worked across different review divisions. This worked across different partners, across different center directors, in order to sort of take this concept and make it real. And so it's a huge shout out and a huge thank you for everyone. And with that, I will be passing it off to Dr. Jennifer Litton, who can sort of talk about this from a perspective of sort of the organizations where these are run, right? MD Anderson, one of the best, cancer sites in the country. They do a ton of amazing work to help patients. And so really to understand from their perspective, what does this mean, right? What would real-time clinical trials mean? And I think we'll also hear that from the sponsors as well as also from the technology vendors. So with that, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to put a little break in here because sometimes my audio gets messed up, but we'll come right back to this spot. Okay, we are back. Let's go ahead and start right back up.
So cancer can come into anyone's life at any time. And when you need the hope of a new treatment, you want that new treatment right away. At the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, we pride ourselves on having more patients participate on cancer treatment trials than anywhere. And we are all united in a single focus to end cancer.
Okay, so again, this is all about oncology. So, I wonder about this idea of stripping down the IND to be just about safety, because ethically, oncology drugs in phase 1, they have to have some kind of promise of efficacy. And MD Anderson, huge cancer center down in Texas.
So thank you, Dr. Makary, to Dr. Walsh, and our friends at the FDA, who are proactively working to get cures faster to patients, and we're here to partner with you. So the good news is that more people are being cured and living with cancer, but we still have many who need new treatments. And we're having an explosion of new scientific discoveries, and these breakthroughs have real promise. So our current challenge is to take these breakthroughs and translate them through rigorously scientific clinical trials. Now, these clinical trials are often our patients' best hope, especially for our patients with advanced cancers. Now, at the same time, we're having a huge surge of new technologies and capabilities that are going to allow us to accelerate these breakthroughs. So right now, we collect vast amounts of complex data, often manually, and then we put them in multiple different systems that were never made to talk to each other.
The idea of manual data collection has come up multiple times. Unless someone's wearing a heart monitor, you're not going to be able to automate some of this stuff. You're not going to automate a chest x-ray. So, some of this is manual. It's just how it is.
So when we do that, we take the time away from our patients and our researchers. We increase cost, and we slow down the time it takes to get the answers we need for our patients. So we have a real opportunity here to streamline the process of collecting the data so that we can effectively evaluate a new treatment. So if we speed this up, we can see earlier signals, whether that's efficacy or real-time toxicity monitoring. So right now is the time to harness these tools to make these clinical trials more accessible to patients. Now, could be that we're activating trials so much quicker, we have more options, whether it's using new tools to get trials to patients closer to where they live, or as we're talking about today, using new and innovative ways to collect, curate, and analyze the data.
I feel like she's almost talking about real-time clinical trials 2.0. So this is almost a vision from the person who is at an institution that manages a lot of clinical trials, a healthcare facility, that she's really talking about more than what the commissioner was talking about. So, there are multiple stakeholders, probably multiple different visions of what the payoff is going to be for real-time clinical trials.
Lastly, research, breakthroughs, discoveries, they're happening at an unprecedented pace. And it's time that we bring our approach to clinical trials up to speed. I can say, as an oncologist, as the daughter of 2 parents with cancer, and as someone diagnosed with cancer this year, I just finished surgery and radiation, that you never know when it's going to be you or whether it's going to be one of your loved ones. If you need the hope for a clinical trial, you want that right then. So on behalf of myself and my colleagues at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, we're proud to work together to pilot, test, and advance anything that's going to accelerate cures for patients. So with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Paul Burton. He's the Senior Vice President at Amgen. Thank you.
I feel like her discussion was very patient-centric. And it's very hard to be critical of a patient. You sound like a jerk if you're not patient-centric. So I think that was a very safe stance to take, hard to argue against. And because in the end, it's about healthcare. So that was a nice approach that she took.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Commissioner Makary, Dr. Walsh, I want to begin by thanking you both and all of your colleagues here at the FDA for your...
Wow, look at the degrees and credentials of this individual. So this is a chief medical officer at Amgen. So another stakeholder. Now this would be a sponsor. They're holding the bag. This is the representative of the group that actually manages the clinical trials.
Continued leadership and your openness to new approaches that can advance patient care while upholding the highest standards of safety and scientific integrity. At Amgen, everything that we do starts with patients, just as it does with all of you. We believe that innovation should not only deliver breakthrough medicines, but also rethink how we develop them. That means supporting approaches that bring research closer to patients where they are and helps reduce the barriers to participation. And this is where the promise of more integrated, data-driven approaches comes into focus. By leveraging data from electronic health records, we have an opportunity to help democratize clinical research. We can reach broader patient populations and generate insights in ways that are more reflective of everyday clinical practice. And this is a meaningful step towards greater health equity and innovation. But I do want to be very clear that pragmatic clinical research, pragmatic clinical trials, does not mean conducting clinical research with less rigor. The fundamentals of good science do not change. Protocol development, protocol oversight, informed consent, monitoring, strong governance, FDA review, all of that remains absolutely standard and absolutely essential.
Okay, so, we've heard a lot of voices advocating for change, but here, this individual from Amgen is very much, we have a process. And so can we throw out all of this? I mean, I think he would say no. He said there are features of this process that should remain part of a new process.
Patient safety and data integrity will always be our North Star. The new approach is designed to sit alongside traditional approaches to doing clinical research and random.
The new approach is designed to sit alongside that. Is this some kind of parallel track? This is not as embracing of this. He's not as gung ho, or my impression is he's not as gung ho as maybe some of the other individuals. I mean, maybe show me, let's see if this works before we get ahead of ourselves.
My studies and contribute to a broader development program and a broader evidence base.
I'm going to put some words in his mouth. I'm sorry, Dr. Burton. I'm guessing he, maybe with this stance, a position might be maybe for some medications, this real-time clinical trial may be really beneficial. Maybe other medications or other indications would go under a more traditional approach, but it's not that one approach is completely dead.
Pilot program that we are doing with tarlatamab, our small cell lung cancer medicine, really exemplifies this. Each of the methods, whether it's a pragmatic real-time clinical trial or a standard clinical trial, can sit together and can help build that complete and comprehensive evidence base. It's an important opportunity for us all to learn now and understand whether an embedded electronic health record native system and model can work credibly, responsibly, and at scale.
I think he sees this. We're on a proof of concept. Let's not declare victory over this problem.
And we believe it can. If successful, it could help us move more efficiently in the future without compromising rigor of clinical science or patient safety.
Now, I will say, again, this person is representing a drug sponsor. These are the people who pay for the clinical trial. If there's a problem after the drug reaches the market, people typically aren't going to point their fingers at the FDA. They're going to say, "Hey, Amgen, what are you doing over there? You're hurting people." So they're the ones who are the face of this drug. It's going to be their drug, hopefully going to be approved as their drug. And so if there's an issue because it wasn't caught early on, they're the ones who have to face that. So it's understandable he wants to show some caution here.
Because, as you just heard, those patients absolutely depend on this every day. By working together, we can help modernize how evidence is generated and ensure that progress reaches more people more efficiently. In the end, for all of us, our goal and our aim is to accelerate cures. So thank you again to the FDA and to our partners at Paradigm Health and to everyone who contributed to this important effort. Most importantly, thank you to the patients who inspire and guide all of the work that I think all of us at this meeting do. And I now have the pleasure to introduce Professor Emma Ma. Professor Ma is Senior Vice Dean of Clinical and Translational Research at University of Pennsylvania Health System. Dr. Ma.
I think he has a kindness. He's a physician, so he has a kind of you'd imagine he has good, gentle bedside manner that came through at the podium, and again, patient-centered. As he's in this position, he has the FDA wanting to change a bunch of stuff, but he's also representing a company. It's like, do we really want things to change? So I think that was a great time at the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. Commissioner, you and your team, thank you for convening us. And to my colleagues, what an opportunity to work in true partnership.
So this individual is from UPenn, again, a large research hospital and academia, lots of clinical trials going on. Not the same as MD Anderson, but closer to MD Anderson than Amgen.
I've been at the University of Pennsylvania for 32 years. Throughout that time, I have been a trialist, working on the front lines, recruiting patients while also taking care of them in their healthcare journeys. My first path down the way of developing a drug was in 2010. It was for a rare genetic disorder. It took me exactly 13 years to get that through FDA approval.
Now I will say, it didn't take 13 years to go through approval. It probably took about a year to get through FDA approval, and maybe it took 12 years to gather evidence for safety and efficacy in order to apply for FDA approval. So that the FDA approval process does not include clinical trials. That's an important distinction, and it gets missed very often. Any drug is going to have to spend time gathering evidence, and presumably some of that evidence is going to come from humans. There's your clinical trials.
It happened on Christmas Eve. It was the best Christmas ever. Now, 32 years later, or 22 years later, 15 years later, the one thing I can say is that as a community, we are wonderful scientists and we are wonderful innovators. However, now is the time to innovate in our process. It's something that has been sorely lacking. I welcome this approach by the FDA to bring novel tools such as AI, data transformation, data transit to bear on our process, because we are at an absolute pivotal stage in the drug development industry. We are losing this work outside of the US. We need to keep it in the US.
You know, part of the UPenn Med Center business model is running clinical trials. And so they might not like it if trials are going elsewhere. So I understand her disappointment.
We need to keep our workforce trained. We need to keep them engaged. We need to consider the barriers to reduce the way in which we do this to bring it to practice much sooner. This particular innovation that involves one of our investigators at Penn, Elise Chan, is going to revolutionize not necessarily the work for the FDA, although that will help, but what it will actually do is help our research coordinators, our nurses, our project managers. They're so hard to find. And when you find them, they're virtually impossible to keep.
Well, you know, there is another video later where the FDA has a little roundtable about this, and they talk about why nurses or some of these staff members are hard to keep, and it mentions their compensation. So maybe there's a reason they leave.
So by easing this process at the academic interface of patient care, we'll have an absolutely revolutionary approach in our ability to sustain this workforce and to keep this type of work occurring within the US, most importantly. So I thank the FDA for giving us this opportunity to be here today. I also thank the audience for being interested in the topic. This needs to be sustained. This is a wonderful idea today.
Okay, I got to build on that. Thanks to the audience. I got to say thank you to the FDA for sharing this content on YouTube. One of the words is obscured in the back, behind her on her back right. It is the end of the word transparency. This kind of content is transparency. And I applaud the FDA for making this available. I don't agree with every bit of it, but it's great that it's shared. It's better than doing all this stuff behind a closed door. It's fantastic. I got to fix those lights again. Okay.
It takes persistence and resilience to make sure that wonderful ideas are implemented and adhered to throughout the future. So thank you for this opportunity. And again, I would also like to thank every single patient who has donated their time to participate in the development of novel therapeutics.
Ideas are implemented and adhered to. Are there some people who aren't adhering to ideas? I would love more expansion on that one phrase.
Oh, I have an introduction. And it's my honor to introduce Amy McKey, who is the Senior Vice President of Oncology, Regulatory Science, and Strategy at AstraZeneca.
Okay, so now a representative from AstraZeneca, an oncologist, of course an oncologist, because all this is about cancer, it seems. But this is, again, this AstraZeneca, major pharma, they're drug sponsors.
Thank you, Commissioner Makary, Jeremy, members of the FDA, and all of you here today, including our partners who are participating in this proof of concept. All of you, thank you.
Proof of concept sounds a little softer than some of the language we've heard before, except for one other person, the person from Amgen, the other drug sponsor.
This program is an important first step towards strengthening clinical trial data collection.
First step.
It underscores the importance of strong collaboration across the entire healthcare ecosystem and plays a critical role in advancing innovative science. The ultimate goal is to move data as quickly as possible across this ecosystem to accelerate our ability to bring new therapies to patients to make a meaningful difference in their lives.
Okay, then I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't memorize what she said, but the number one goal is to move data to help patients. And there's a little construction outside my window. I'm sorry if it's loud. But to move data to help patients. So democratize healthcare, bring clinical trials back to the United States. I'm not hearing that here. I'm hearing let's keep this centered on the patient, because it's hard to argue against that.
Today, AstraZeneca has more than 100 phase 3 trials underway, most of which are being performed here in the US as well as across the world. And we have 20 potential new medicines in our late-stage portfolio. These efforts, similar to my peers here today, are studying some of the most transformative medicines and some of the most difficult to treat diseases. In oncology, for example, we have a bold ambition to eliminate cancer as a cause of death, and a focus in key tumor areas such as lung, breast, liver, and blood cancers, just to name a few. In addition, we are developing a broad portfolio of personalized treatments that target different subtypes across all stages of cancer. Today, the pace of innovation and new advances in science and technology is truly remarkable. We commend the FDA for recognizing this as an opportune moment to pursue new regulatory approaches that will further meet this rapid pace of innovation. Furthermore, this is a first step in FDA's ambitious vision to move toward a future where clinical trial updates are shared in real time.
Okay, shared. Now we're talking, I think, between the clinicians, the sponsor, and the FDA, but they don't talk much about transparency of data. Who owns this data? Who owns these data once the trial is complete? Where are they housed? These are all IRB kind of questions. And pharma isn't always known for being transparent in their information sharing. So this is a big cultural shift, I think, or at least I'm sure pharmaceutical companies, the sponsors, have a lot of questions. How is this going to be handled? And how do we know that the data will be protected if it's not in our hands?
At AstraZeneca, we strive to transform the future of healthcare by unlocking the power of what science can do for people, for society, and for the planet. At the heart of this, what drives each and every one of us here in this room today, day in and day out, are the patients we serve. We appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this proof of concept as all of us continue to advance on bringing safe, effective medicines to the patients in the United States and around the world. Thank you again, Commissioner Makary, Jeremy, and all of you for joining us today. I would like to introduce now founder and CEO of Paradigm Health, Kent Thoelke, who is one of our partners in this.
That got a little grandiose at the end, but again, it was definitely patient-centered.
First of all, I want to thank the Commissioner and Jeremy and really the entire FDA team for what has been a phenomenally fast journey the last 6 months. I have been in this industry for 35 years.
I apologize for the noise outside. I'm just going to apologize and try to talk over it for a second. Hope it goes away. They've got an angle grinder running. Okay, maybe that's it.
Seen thousands of cancer patients die in that time. The reason speed is critical, the reason this initiative is critical, is because every day an efficacious drug stays off the market costs patient lives. Every day a patient can't get access to a life-saving medication that's part of a clinical trial costs lives. The folks on this stage behind me, everybody at the FDA, the team we have at Paradigm Health, moved at a speed I have never seen in my career to get us to this point, to have an active, live, real-time clinical trial. That impact is not theoretical. It is felt by family members and patients in real time today. They sent the tech guy up here to talk about patients, which is a little bit different, but I spent most of my career on the patient side until I saw the challenges that we were facing. Too few trials were getting to too few patients, and I launched a tech company. But what brings us here today, everybody on this stage, is a shared mission to make sure that all patients across this country have a real opportunity to participate in clinical trials and benefit from innovative therapies.
There is an overtone here that if you're sick, you need to be in a clinical trial. There are a lot of medications that are already approved that address a patient's need. So now there are certainly situations where the standard of care is not adequate for certain patients, but everybody doesn't need to be in a clinical trial. And that sort of is the impression that's given by some of the people at the podium.
Not just patients who happen to live in a big city or near an academic medical center, but the patients that receive their care in the community and in rural healthcare settings as well. Because today, where you live and where you get your health care still plays too big a role in deciding whether or not you'll even have access to those drugs or those clinical trials. With the launch of this FDA study, Paradigm Health's platform, along with our pharma and industry partners and healthcare system partners we have on stage here today, we've laid the foundation to better serve all Americans with a higher quality, accelerated model. This brings together all of the skill sets of leading academic medical centers like MD Anderson and the University of Pennsylvania, who are at the forefront of complex and high-quality research. Their role is essential. They anchor the rigor and the scientific method and the quality behind the work that we've launched here today. At the same time, this model expands into the community and into the rural setting, a system that can be scaled today because of technology.
It's interesting that he gave credit to MD Anderson and UPenn, but he didn't mention the drug sponsors there. It seems like an oversight.
Through this collaboration, technology is now helping to reduce the extremely complex workflow that is required of study coordinators and physicians at these healthcare systems to participate in research. That means more patients can actually participate and choose clinical trial options at home, where they receive their care with physicians and caregivers that they trust and know. That's an important shift, because what it does is it makes clinical trials not an exception, but it can become the rule. It also makes sure that clinical trials can be part of everyday care.
That's kind of interesting. I wouldn't have thought of this aspect of this. It's got to be reduced to practice, but that's kind of interesting.
Another part of this effort that we're launching is speed. The ability to get trials done quicker in a more broad representative population and broad care setting gives us an opportunity to understand in real time and quicker how drugs are actually working in the community. That can help the FDA and sponsor companies make more informed decisions along the way in real time instead of waiting until the end. Ultimately, this shortens the pathway from promising science to treatments that actually treat patients. When this model becomes the standard, a patient in small-town America should have the same opportunity to participate in a clinical trial and get a life-saving medication as someone treated in a major academic medical center. That's the standard we should be working for. That's the care all patients deserve today. And it's why partners like the folks on this stage matter. Together, the FDA, AstraZeneca, Amgen, MD Anderson, and the University of Pennsylvania, and the entire team at Paradigm Health, we're working to demonstrate what a modern, transparent, and more inclusive clinical trial system can look like at a national level. One that expands access, one that moves faster, one that helps bring new treatments and hopefully cures to all Americans, regardless of where they live or get their health care. We're extremely proud to support the FDA in this effort and grateful to be part of something that I think in my career can finally make a difference for patients. With that, I'd like to...
Can finally make a difference. Differences have been made for patients before Paradigm Health.
Introduce the FDA Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Malika Mundkar.
Hi, everyone. I want to start by thanking the Commissioner and Jeremy and everyone else on the stage for incredible work.
So we opened with the FDA Commissioner, and now we're closing with another member of the FDA, kind of bookending this entire press conference.
Particularly Commissioner and Jeremy, I want to say that this is yet another really bold idea. And I think over the past year, we have seen things happen at FDA that we didn't think were possible. Some of us didn't think were possible. And we've seen it happening. So I think I want to encourage people to think of this idea the same way. It sounds like a big vision, and it is. And it's already happening. It's happened. And the goal is to expand it.
It is a bold idea. That's completely legitimate. And they are trying new things. That's great. I know not everybody's a fan of every change, and there has been some controversy around some of the changes, but they are trying new things. And I think that's to the benefit. It is to the potential benefit for protecting the public health.
So in the next phase of this initiative, the idea is to scale this across the agency. We have already engaged with internal subject matter experts, and as of today, we've issued an RFI to solicit feedback from the public.
So scale this across the agency. I almost get the sense that this announcement is declaring a victory, and now this is going to become, if not the norm, moving in that direction somewhat quickly. So I'm not crazy about that, but that's just what seems to be coming from the podium.
About how we can scale this in a way that adds the greatest value for public health. So encourage you guys to check that out on the Federal Register. And share your ideas, or you can email us. Any form of communication is welcome as we kind of shape this together going forward. Thank you.
Okay, and that's it. Let's see what's coming up.
All right, thank you again to all of our amazing speakers. We're now going to start our Q&A portion. I ask that you keep it to the topic of today's announcement, and when you're handed the microphone, to also state your name and outlet. So, Arthur, we can start with you.
Sorry.
Arthur Jones II, ABC News. Commissioner Makary, I hope you're doing okay after the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. But given today's announcement, do you have any outstanding concerns about missing safety signals or not having enough time to review the data from clinical trials? Thank you.
Okay, missing safety signals. You're only going to get the information you ask for, if I understand this correctly. So that's a valid question, and it's from someone at ABC News, I believe.
Arthur, good to see you, and thank you for mentioning that about Saturday. It was quite an experience. I was sitting in the front, and it just makes you realize that none of us are going to be here forever, and that life can be short. These are thoughts I've had as a cancer doctor at the bedside, but I just want to take a moment and thank the security team that was able to stop the perpetrator. On the safety signal, safety is our number one priority. It's a great question you're asking.
I don't think safety is the number one priority. In drug approval, it's safety and efficacy, or safe and effective. You can't measure safety without defining what is the efficacy. The benefit risk, those go together, and you can't quantify one without the other. So I get it. You got to say things are going to be safe, but I don't think you can say that that's our main focus.
The companies, that is the sponsors, and the FDA scientists agree on safety signals and clinical endpoints with any ongoing study design. So that agreement is still part of this process. We're going to preserve that. And because those safety signals can be sent directly to the FDA, they will be safety signals that are mutually agreed upon.
Okay, I just cut him off. But, I think a fair question to that would be, how often is there a clinical trial where the sponsor and FDA agree upon a safety signal, and yet some other safety signal appears that wasn't in the original list? So that's, when do things fall through the cracks, and how do you accommodate that? I'm guessing it happens with some regularity, but maybe I'm wrong.
That'll achieve a couple things. One, it'll limit our purview to what's important for the approval process. And number two, it'll allow us to pilot a new concept because initially we will take both the data submitted the routine way and the data that we're able to see in real time, and we'll do both. And that's part of the pilot process. And then by definition of a pilot, we'll reassess at the end of the pilot to see what we can do better. And we want to learn. That's why we have an RFI going out today. That's why we're taking questions. That's why we're socializing the idea. Dr. Jeremy Walsh has been working on this. I keep calling him Dr. Walsh, but he's been working on this since the day he arrived. And I think this has been an idea that's been brewing. It's come up in conferences prior to my time at the FDA, but Jeremy got it done.
Yeah.
So, he did say their data will be collected in the routine way, the current methods, and as well as the real time. So, that's fair. That's great.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I think the primary objective of the agency is safety, safety and efficacy. And so none of those.
Yeah, the latter answer, safety and efficacy, not safety.
Things change. I think the Commissioner mentioned is that as part of even the prototype that we did, we're going to get the same data. We're going to get the data through the normal regulatory process that we have established today, as we also see it in real time. So that was the prototype, to sort of see this data flowing in, right? The goal here is to sort of get to a regulatory decision in a faster timeline, right? Without compromising any safety. We actually believe that you can probably do more analysis. You can look at other things. Industry will invent and come up with new ways they can pull different pieces of data together. So the goal here is to kind of raise the bar about what can be done. But this isn't there's no sacrifices being made here in terms of both the prototype or the pilot.
Well, they're going to find out if there are sacrifices, and maybe they can, if there are shortcomings, they can address them. But I don't think you can say there will be no sacrifices. They're doing this pilot study to see if there are any sacrifices, and that's a fair answer. They're figuring this out. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not an admission of weakness. Hey, you got to try it, see what happens.
Okay. No more I'm shocked. Yeah.
Hi, Lauren Gardner from Politico. This is for Commissioner Makary. You mentioned earlier, kind of all the different aspects of the clinical trial process and then review process that you're looking to, kind of revolutionize here in the different centers. You pointed to Dr. Hoag's efforts on animal studies. Can you give us an update on some of these leadership positions that'll be critical to carrying this work forward in the near and medium term?
Okay, this is going to take resources.
Drug center, biologic center.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the search for the director of the biologic center is going extremely well. We have terrific candidates. That process is going well. No decision has been reached at this point, but I expect it in the coming weeks. On the broader FDA approval process, we want to keep.
So that question might have been a subtle jab at, hey, there's been some leadership turnover. What's the status on that? Maybe that question might have gone over my head the first time I heard it.
Iterating, getting ideas, re-engineering that process. So we're gonna keep doing that. The animal testing part that you mentioned is a key part of it. Did I answer your question? Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah, make sure you're here.
Hi there, this is Maisha with Pink Sheet. My question is for Commissioner Makary. Would FDA's proposed optional clinical trial pathway would hinge on deeper reforms to the IRB process? And how is the FDA planning to make IRB reforms, if you could elaborate a bit on that?
In Commissioner Makary's one-year review, he did not have a lot of positive things to say about the IRB review process. So let's see what he has to say here.
Sure, and anyone else who would like to chime in, feel free. But here's what I'd like to say. Good to see you, Manisha. So the IRB process in the United States is an unfortunate rate-limiting step to the entire U.S. healthcare research infrastructure.
It seems his position is unchanged.
A committee of hospital volunteers that sometimes meets
Oh my good, volunteers. They can't be qualified.
Is literally a rate-limiting step. And so we have to rethink how we do IRB approvals. We have to ask big questions like, can more institutions use central IRBs, or if they don't use the central IRBs and recognize them, turn their own IRBs around in 30 or 45 days.
So, if you're going to have a central IRB, who's going to control that? Who's going to appoint the members? I guess they're not going to be volunteers, but, these are, this brings, this doesn't sound like transparency. There will be some decisions about who will be on that committee, and will they, on that review board, and will they smile favorably on the protocols that are submitted?
We have to ask those big questions. As you know, more clinical trials are starting in China than in the United States. This is something that happened in the preceding 4 years before I came to office, and that has been literally an exodus of phase 1 trials. Some are also going to Australia. We have to think about how we can do things competitively, efficiently, and yet not cut any corners on safety. And so that means re-examining the entire IND process, the requirements that we have, what can be deferred until later in the process. Do you need 6 months of stability testing to do a first-in-human injections? Do you need the detailed raw data before you initiate the IND? Or can summary data suffice until the send file can be delivered later? We have to re-examine that entire process. So we are working with universities in conversations to solicit their ideas on how to reform the the IRB approval.
So they're talking to universities, I'm guessing, because for the most part, universities are where these clinical trials are occurring. So university healthcare systems are ostensibly losing business overseas to China and apparently Australia, and no one wants to see those dollars leave. Least of all these university healthcare systems. So that the problem is some of this sounds like it's about money, not just about patient outcomes.
We are looking at our own requirements and have teams actively, with many of whom are here, the scientists at the FDA, are actively working on streamlining those IND requirements. And I expect a series of announcements in the coming 1 to 2 months where we will lay out very clearly a new path for phase 1 clinical trials and INDs in the United States so we can retain our leadership position. Thanks.
All right, we'll take one more.
Hey, Frank Conco from GovExec. I feel like this is the latest in a series of big, bold technology moves that FDA has been doing over the past year. You're doing it without really much more resources or funding. I'm curious, Commissioner, if you could just talk about the transformation that's been afoot over the last year and change, and maybe what else we could expect in the coming months.
Great. Maybe Dr. Muncourt can answer. I will just preface by saying that thanks to the modernization efforts by our entire IT and AI team here at FDA, we have been able to get away from the fiefdom culture where every center has had their own license agreement for the same software and their own system for, say, adverse event reporting, application uploading, safety monitoring systems. And we have done a massive consolidation. So we now have one system instead of 40 systems that intake applications. We take applications for cat food and vaccines for farm animals and devices and wearables and tobacco and cosmetics. We had 40 different systems, now we're going to one. We had 3 major data monitoring systems for safety that we tapped, we're going to go to 1. And we had 7 adverse event reporting systems, all built separately, all clunky, all frustrating. We did our own internal analysis, and 60% of the people that went to our own adverse event reporting systems to report an adverse event gave up after they started. They never got through it. The final report was never filed. We can see that they went on there. So we don't want systems where you go in to do a simple task and you're in the middle of it and you think, I'd rather die than do this. So we are going to 1 adverse event reporting system instead of CARES and FAIRS and MARES and MAUD, and we're going to 1. So all of that is going to save us at least $120 million a year. What are we doing with that $120 million?
Returning it to the American taxpayer.
We are reinvesting it in our scientific community. We are hiring almost 3,000 new scientists.
Okay, $120 million divided by, and let's say that's an annual savings, divided by 3,000 new scientists is $40,000 per scientist. So those 3,000 scientists have already burned through that $120 million and then a lot more.
We are investing in new technologies.
You don't have any money left. So he's got to have more than $120 million to do that.
And that added reserve in our resources will support the bold reform agenda that we have. Dr. Muncour?
So I think it's a really good question. How are we going to manage this resource-wise, right? But I do want to stress the fact that FDA is, and the people at FDA, having worked here for many years, are extremely mission-oriented, right? We are serving the public, we're serving patients, and that is our North Star, right? So for people to, spend time on something that they're passionate about, I would say there's some fuel in there.
It sounds like you don't have to pay people if they're doing work they enjoy. Now to her credit, Commissioner Makary took over this question. So she's now got to follow up on that, and he took some of the best answers. So she's now got to complete this.
It drives motivation, but I think the success of any of these bold initiatives really comes from leadership by the staff, the frontline staff, the leaders that really have the long-standing expertise. And that's, I think, driven the success of other initiatives and will be a critical part of this one as well, which is really engaging with our internal subject matter experts to help lead these and design these in a way that's operationally feasible and really effective.
I think you just say, if we need more resources, hopefully these pilot projects will show some fruit from our labor, and we can take that to Congress and justify the fact that we need more resources to expand these programs, which do benefit the American public. At end of it,
Okay, thank you so much for coming today, and that's a wrap. Thanks.
Okay, great. Well, listen, again, I made some critical comments, but I am a huge fan of the FDA putting this out so that the general public can look at this and review it. It's important. And they are trying bold initiatives. Not every one of them is going to be perfect, and some might be bad ideas, but that's normal. Anybody who's trying to do something new they're going to hit some stone walls but some of this stuff is probably going to be very beneficial to the American public, hopefully to the benefit of clinical trial sites and the benefit of major pharma as well. So hopefully it's a win for everyone. Thank you for your attention. Please let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to cover in these types of videos. I hope you take care and have a good day.